Hello and welcome to Castle's Corner. I am Coach Castle, and this is the next video in the Red Pill of Resistance exercise series. Today we're going to be going over the hamstrings. Specifically, we're going to be talking briefly about close chains movements, which are also mostly compound movements. We're going to be talking about how gravity affects anatomy, briefly. The leg press, squat, deadlift, Romanian deadlift, single leg deadlift, stiff leg deadlift, and all those variations. Why they are ineffective for training the hamstring, and 2 better alternatives. We're going to be talking about the resistance curve, isometric contraction versus dynamic contraction. We're going to be talking about time under tension, range of motion, the resistance curve, alignment of your levers, and how the hamstring is basically the same as your bicep, actually. And one more thing in this video, you will hear me talk about the erector spinal. What that is your lower back. It's mistakenly called your lower back. However, it actually travels up from your pelvis through to the back of your skull, just so you know. So anyways, let's get into it, guys.
The hamstrings are a group of muscles and their tendons at the rear of the upper leg. The hamstrings flex the knee joint and extend the thigh to the backside of the body. The hamstring muscles have their origin where their tendons attach to the bone behind the knee. Now, the bicep is called the bicep because it is made up of 2 muscles. Likewise, the hamstring as well is only made up of 2 muscles. Both hamstrings and the biceps only have one origin and one insertion for both muscle groups. Therefore, your bone or lever can only move in one direction, and you can only do this efficiently or inefficiently. Now, your goal when exercising should be to contract only the muscle fibers that you're trying to work. And once you know where the origin and insertion are in the skeletal system for any muscle, you can then very simply look at the grain of the muscle fibers to tell the correct direction to pull the operating lever or bone in. Now, the more range of motion you're able to put the muscle through, the better. And if you have full range of motion as well as optimum positioning, you get the most effective result. The things that really determine what benefits a muscle the most are the direction of the motion, the range of motion in the resistance curve, and making sure you have adequate resistance in the early part of the range of motion. And of course, making sure that you're not compromising the resistance to that muscle by some inadequate mechanics or neurological interferences like reciprocal intervention, of course, or using faulty mechanics on a machine.
The first movement we'll be going over is how to correctly perform a lying leg extension, which is my preferred exercise for the hamstring, specifically because the muscle is not restricted in any way and it is allowed full range of motion under control. For the lying hamstring curl, raise the weight explosively, pause or flex at the peak, slowly lower the weight, 4 seconds time under tension. Always focus on quality, not quantity, and as many reps as possible. As you can see here, this is what the muscles look like inside my body as I perform the hamstring curl. A complete contraction will be 60%, and as you near completion, you will get weaker. At the beginning of the motion, you're at a mechanical disadvantage. However, that is where you're strongest. As the muscle contracts, you get weaker. The reason for this is as you contract your muscle, the fibers bunch up together. Again, think of the hamstring or the bicep, what it looks like. And due to that, you will get weaker as you contract because the muscle fibers are getting shortened. Explode at the bottom, flex at the top, and then slowly lower for about 4 seconds, as you can see. This is the best way to perform this exercise. There is no point in more than 4 seconds lowering. 4 seconds is sufficient. Now, as you're doing this movement, you may find that your back arches and your butt goes up. This is because your pelvis is tilting naturally to allow greater range of movement in your hamstrings. Let this happen. Now, as you can see here, the hamstring looks very much like the bicep. The origin and the insertions and even the bones are the same. All the levers are identical. Again, as we can see, performing a single leg hamstring curl, this is what it would look like. Done correctly. Here, you can see me doing it with a 10-pound weight attached to an ankle strap. Once again, exploding upwards, flexing at the top and lowering it slowly for about 4 seconds. Even with only 10 pounds, this is a difficult movement for me due to the fact that I have very long levers.
Another reason why you always want to put the weight at the very end of your lever, because it magnifies it. And as you can see, the hamstring is identical to the bicep. It even looks the same. Now we're going to get into what you do not want to do. Common mistakes or bad advice. So basically just going too fast, swinging the weight wildly, getting a pump, and getting lactic acid. A pump and lactic acid do not correlate to muscle growth. However, you will stop if there's too much blood in the muscle due to the pain. Now, only having partial range of motion is no better. Full range of motion will always be superior for any given exercise. So, if you're doing these crazy 88s, I see people do it, it just simply doesn't make any sense. You're fatiguing the muscle but not actually strengthening it or growing it completely. Inefficient. Improper alignment is another one that I commonly see. People don't understand that you have to put the pad at the end of the lever not only for comfort but also so you maximally use the lever. The reason people do this is they're allowed to use more weight because they're shortening their levers. Same problem here. On the alignment scale, should be down below the hinge of your joint, and the hinge and the pivot should be lining up for maximum effectiveness. Here we have the good morning. Common exercise performed for the hamstrings. Not efficient at all, as the glutes actually are the ones performing the exercise. As you can clearly see, the hamstrings are not being contracted in a useful manner. They are being stretched and then shortened, but they are not being flexed nor contracted with any degree of motion, making this a very inefficient exercise for the hamstrings. This one is the good morning, commonly done to strengthen the hamstrings and develop them. However, the problem is it's mostly the glutes doing the work. So it's a very limited range of motion. It is ineffective muscle loading, high injury risk, primarily loads your lower back, secondarily loads the glutes, and neither of these muscles are even trying to be loaded in the first place. You're trying to work your hamstrings. As you can see again, they're not being loaded. They're just being stretched. They're not even really being moved that much. This is not an efficient exercise. It's very minimal range of motion. Or if it's being held in your hands. It's really the only difference. Obviously, again, we're isometrically loading the back. And as you can see, the glute is doing all of the work. The yellow is simply being isometrically held and secondarily worked. And the purple, the hamstring, is being stretched and barely worked at all. Here we have closed chains movements. Now these are anything like a squat, a deadlift, basically anything that requires your body to be moving in a compound way. Closed chains movements are not efficient for muscle growth because they always use multiple muscles. If you use multiple muscles, you are compromising all of them. Now, gravity doesn't care what position your body's in. If the weight is in your hands or on your shoulders, it just pushes straight down. It's up to you to understand how your levers work and put yourself in the best position for this. Now, this is primarily due to poor range of motion and a poor resistance curve. This forces you to use large weights,